excellence here at Insight. My role is to work with our portfolio companies as they grow on everything from product strategy to operations to organizational design, et cetera. And in my journeys here, I had the opportunity to meet Becky Flint, who is the CEO of Dragonboat. And I'm going to let her give her a little bit more of her background in a moment, but I was just very excited to meet her and learn about what she's doing and her deep experience with portfolio management. And so asked her if she'd be willing to bring her wisdom to this larger group, and she graciously agreed. So excited to have her here today. This is also part of a 3-part series on portfolio management. So hopefully you'll be able to attend all 3 sessions. We'll share more details on the next ones, but they're August 17th and September 14th. And you can sign up for those, I think, in the same place you signed up for this one. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Becky and we'll kick this off. And as Christina said, pop any questions in the Q&A. I will monitor that and make sure we get to as many as possible in our time together. There you go.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Christina. And nice meeting you, everyone. I am going to share my screen as I'm getting started through. Can you see my screen all right?
Looks great.
Looks good.
Awesome. Okay. So I'm very excited to come to share with everyone a little bit about portfolio management and actually really around how we upgrade product management to portfolio management as the company scale. So a little bit about myself, as Rachel shared, I'm the founder and CEO of Dragonboat, which is a SaaS platform for outcome-focused product leaders and their teams. And Dragonboat really came about from some of my experiences scaling product teams and build product portfolio management for some of pretty amazing companies. We're very fortunate and came through their journey from less than 100 people sometimes to go on to hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands. And hopefully we can bring some of the learnings to this session and help kind of spark some of the newer practices as we bring from these companies. This first part is around when and why to scale from product management to portfolio management, and a couple more around how and some of the best practices. So without further ado, I want to just jump in a little bit on how it all gets started. It's a little bit over 10 years ago. At that time, PayPal was growing actually fairly rapidly, and I was a part of the international expansion team, helping PayPal to scale from a couple of countries to hundreds of countries. And we were struggling with the scaling pains. We tried everything. We did agile transformation. We did a centralization, decentralization, reorg many different ways and try to solve the problem, but it's not solving it. And from some internal experimentation, we found a way how to manage in my area. So I walk into the room of the VP of Tech and Business Operations. He's relatively new. Say, hey, we're just stopped by everyone else. And we can't do the way we do in prioritization and hoping everything just people negotiate out. We have to take a portfolio approach to run our product. And he's looking at me, he's very confused. Portfolio, but PayPal is a product or PayPal is a portfolio. So we had a very interesting conversation at that moment around the history and the types of portfolios. Most of us are very familiar with product portfolios when you think about a very distinctive product. You can acquire them separately. And regardless, these are like, the Apples or checking accounts, that's like very well understood product portfolio. They're separate product. Now they're also later on involved into sort of the project portfolio. They are also separate projects. And you define the scope, there are a project, it's done, it's done. It's a very clean cut. You can do project 1, not project 2. When you come to this very interesting beast of one product portfolio, that is a little bit of new concept. So I want to cover a little bit of why we call it one product with the parentheses around it, is that it's actually not just one product. When you think about PayPal, you have consumers who are using PayPal to buy and pay. And there's the merchant who uses PayPal to receive payments. Those are a visible product. There are also underlying products, the payments that kind of engines support both consumer and the merchant. And there's a risk also the engines support them. So you actually cannot just get one, not the other. You get the whole thing, even though that's multiple product. So that's a portfolio that's intertwined. And so what does it mean? There are also, we become to see more and more this sort of one product portfolio. So how do you manage when the teams are building and scaling and building different parts, where portfolio management is actually the approach to manage them? So we have to really take one step back, thinking about portfolio management beyond as a portfolio of product, beyond a portfolio of projects. And really what it is the concept from a financial word is a investment options, where you invest in your different parts of business, different parts of product, so that you can achieve the outcome that you need to achieve. Now, the outcome also is different, right, in the financial world of portfolio management. So that concept, we brought into the early days of the portfolio management at PayPal, and to create this team and org structure and a job title called portfolio managers is really to help different part of the team looking at the different investment options and what kind of outcomes we want to collectively achieve. So what happens is it turns out we all manage a portfolio that's multi-dimensional, not just one product focused dimension, right? You have different customers, they use different set of the products, and you have a different focus of these products. You also have a portfolio goals, right? Are we going to grow? Are we going to drive top line goals? Are we going to have retention? We're going to have to solve operational efficiency. These are the goals also competing, right? These are also investment options. Then obviously there are technical dependencies that different teams can chime in, want different pieces. So I will take this looking at an example of when we think about portfolio management, it is always there, but we don't have to focus on day one. When the things become a more essential is when you have multiple teams. These choices become a more, dominant in the conversation. And these multiple teams, they all have different goals. So then the dependencies that drive them, tying everyone together. Or you have use case expansions, all these pieces leading to each other. So the complexity really drive to decision-making beyond one team level, decision-making beyond one goal level. So with that example, we can take a look at earlier days of PayPal, lots of product having similar challenges, where when we had a consumer team, consumer product, their focus is about frictionless buying. And, from a merchant product perspective, the focus of the product team for the customer is help them grow their business and help PayPal to increase payment volume. Now, from a payment product team, even though they're not seeing outside, it's internal to PayPal, they do have a goal to reduce transaction cost. And then risk, obviously, prevent fraud. But what you notice is that the goals are conflict. For you to have a frictionless buying, you want to give people more choices, and you want them to go through as quickly as they can, but reduce the cost. Transaction costs that will limit, or at least direct users to use the least costly options for the user. For the user, so PayPal actually has less transaction costs, or you have a fraud engine that's stronger, have a higher hold or decline, or some sort of the validation and so on. These are conflicting goals by different product teams. At the same time, nothing can be done by one team. So when you want to launch, for example, PayPal to Italy, that's one of the products I led with our cross-functional team, where we have to go to payments team, have them support us, have to go to risk team and a merchant team. So now we have two scenarios. Number one, we have our own goals that sometimes compete and the conflict with our other teams' goals at the same time, we all have to play nice together, get onto their roadmap, being prioritized. And that's where things become pretty challenging for us to do. And that's really when portfolio approach became so essential to companies. So the way we look at the portfolio, again, is taking one step back to say, hey, do we have a portfolio of allocation between merchant, between consumer, between risk, between payment, so that we would have a portfolio construct and we have our roadmap, everyone happy to go? That it's not necessarily true, because when we set the alignment and set our goals, that's at the point of time. As things goes on, some of the goals become more relevant, more urgent, and more challenging. So the story, for example, going back to the difference between having a frictionless payment experience for consumers versus a cost control, transaction cost reduction goal for the payments team. So I don't know, some of you used PayPal in the earlier days, or maybe just even a few years ago. We internally, there had been a pretty big debate for many, many years on, do we want to add more friction to consumers when they try to make a payment? Because every time you log into PayPal, try to make a payment to something, that always default to say, pay with the balance and pay with your bank. Now, if you want to say, hey, I want to pay with the credit card so I can earn points and whatnot, you have to change that, make credit card payment. And next time you come around, it's still the same thing. You have to make an extra click, because that is trying to direct users to use a bank, which is a cheaper funding source for PayPal, where they can have a higher margin when users using bank versus credit. Now, obviously, add friction. In the earlier days of PayPal, where PayPal was a more dominant player in a space, not a whole lot of competition, and also in the earlier days, PayPal, it really requires lots of cost and revenue to expand to other product area, other regions, building new business. So controlling cost became something more important, or at least equally as important as the friction. And the user at that time wasn't as concerned or as the sort of being forced to change the payment method every time. However, as time goes on, consumers became more savvy and they demand better experience. There are more competition, and PayPal has expanded to lots of areas, the low-hanging fruit already being addressed. So the math has a tilt. So if you look at the cost saving from a directing user to use a certain payment method versus the opportunity cost, a potential churn or expansion and so on of having friction in payment, started to play out differently. So we actually changed how the product would work so that it would drive more frictionless payment and at the cost of a transaction. So that lever has been kind of adjusted all along. So what we're talking about here is in the responsive portfolio management space, we actually have to adjust our desired outcome periodically based on how the market works, how the business work, how the consumer evolves. So some of the goals become less important versus the others. So this is an example. I'm looking at the portfolio, not the PayPal. It's a hypothetical example. This is a screenshot I actually took out of a Dragonboat product. On the left, you can see a list of product and initiatives and ideas that could help drive certain goals. You have that kind of prioritization already there. That prioritization, for the most part, linear, right? You can prioritize the features based on certain set of criteria and whatnot. Now, on the right side, it's really what you think and use portfolio for a higher level decision making, in that you can see goals, and you can see the allocation towards these goals. You also see this red, green and yellow dots. The green and the yellow dots are not about these product and features that you're working on right now. The product and features you're working on right now is the current state. The things are not in production yet, right? Not touching customer yet. But the goal itself has its own health. Are we doing well in expansion? Are we growing? Are we doing well in a growth core market? And these are based on what already being put out. So if we want to have an outcome-focused organization, not only use outcome to help direct where we focus, we also need to know what happened next. As you pushing product to market, as you have people using it, and then we start to have the result of that across the key metrics we have, and that should drive the next phase of a portfolio investment. So in this example, that what we wanted to do is actually reduce the amount of the allocation to healthy goals, that instead of having more than 20% of a target allocation, and we actually want to reduce it and then put these investment into the area that are underperforming. Now, when we say here underperforming, we're talking about goals. We're not talking about the teams. So that as you go through annual planning, quarterly planning, or bi-monthly check-in, that you would be able to adjust your allocation across different areas where your rest of your team can actually adjust what they will be focusing on across the board. So I will just take a quick recap on product management, portfolio management, the differences, and where we think about it. A lot of times people say portfolio management is product management times and teams. It's actually functionally not quite exactly work that way. Typically, when you think about product management, you really think about I have product goals, I target my customers, I have a team working towards my product goals, and I create my product roadmaps based on priorities, and I gather customer feedback and then make sure we prioritize them, we tie them into different product themes, product goals, and then we have a roll-up reporting on 5, 6, 10 product teams, right? That is product management way of portfolio management. That's not real portfolio management. When you think about portfolio management, what you really should think about it is that the first question you ask yourself as a scale up, not a just one team startup. When you have a scale up, when you have multiple teams, you have multiple product managers, product owners, and you will ask yourself, what's the health of my portfolio management? Do we have multi-team, multi-quarter initiatives? If you don't have multi-team, multi-quarter initiatives, that's an alarming sign, because when you scale up, there's no software at scale can be built by one team. There's no software at scale be built by within a quarter. So when you see portfolio management, really we're talking about how a multi-team, multi-quarter initiative coming together. That means that we need to define portfolio goals, multiple goals that, product goals obviously align to some of them. But the main thing here in a portfolio goal, some product teams' goal is to support another product team or a few other product teams, because collectively our overall goal requires the collaboration even at the goal level. And that really leads to the next one, which is cross-team collaboration. When we have individual teams, and that's something a lot of scale-up companies and everyone I went to, from the early days PayPal to Shutterfly and BigCommerce and so on, we all tried to restructure our team based on personas, based on user journeys, and based on tech stack. There are so many ways to reorganize team. What happens is no matter how you organize the team, it is always required to have cross-team collaboration. So, and that's something, keep in mind that the portfolio management really is around align product goals across the board. Now, the third part about that is it's really mapping to outcome focus, the roadmap versus, sort of product or feature factory, meaning that the portfolio overall will have, created into roadmaps by different teams. And that all have to come together at the portfolio level to see, do we need to change and make adjustment from, bi-monthly, quarterly, and so on, based on the size of the company and the speed you go to market. And then a couple more things, customer-inspired product management versus customer feedback management. That is so critical, because when you look at the customer feedbacks, and really using an example of a PayPal, where if we would, earlier days PayPal really focusing on things, for example, you have personal payments, and then you go buy things off on eBay. So it was such a big part of the PayPal business, more than 75%. And if we would focus on eBay merchants feedbacks, there will be infinite amount of things to do. How you go to another business, that product team really looking at, say, hey, all the merchants selling on eBay, there are 100 times more not selling on eBay. How we support these? So from there, building a product that abstract, so that you have a merchant and the eBay as two different solutions for similar market, but different market. So that really led to, from obviously the rely on eBay to grow into the merchant business, amongst many others. So and the final words around portfolio management is that's the common theme we have seen a lot, is that people say, I have a portfolio tool that gives me a portfolio dashboard. And that's like so dangerous to think about it. It's just roll up something and then you have a portfolio view, right? Really the essence of portfolio management is not the reporting part. The essence of the portfolio management is really around the top-down alignment from executive levels, from a higher level, where we want to go, how we get there at the higher level, so that we understand both the context and strategy. Then the individual teams can innovate and it can be empowered to figure out solutions. And that also provide the visibility and the resourcing need and support from each team before you go to actually building the product. So, and then obviously portfolio reporting is just a part of the follow-up. So hopefully that provides some of the context between product management and how not to have product management times and into so-called portfolio management. The real portfolio management really is top-down and bottoms-up across team at all times. So a little bit quick preview of some of the topics for the next session, really focusing on how we actually take the concept to the teams that are today are empowered. So we cannot micromanage them. We cannot tell them what to do, but we can provide the framework and the context and alignment for the empowered teams to be able to do what they can do best, with the right prioritization, with the right practice along the way. So I think that's pretty much a structured, prepared content for this session around portfolio management, when you need them, and how you look at it in a way that's a little bit different from a traditional, because the way we're in today, the software, the distributed teams, and the changing environment much faster. So here's some of the additional resources. And I am going to pause and have a more dialogue with the rest of the team and Rachel.
Hi. Yeah, sorry, everyone. I'm going to be disembodied Rachel voice because my Zoom video decided to stop working and I can't get it to start working again. So apologies for the lack of visual on this, but thank you, Becky. That was awesome. And we've already got some questions in the Q&A. So just a reminder to everybody who's attending, if that brought up some questions for you, pop them in the Q&A, and I will be sharing them with Becky, and we will jam through as many of them as we can. So I think the first one we'll start with is around organizational structure. So Martin asked, how do you organize UX, product management, development, et cetera, at different altitude levels to make this possible? They are struggling with the balance between a few things. One is different audiences that consume the same core features in a different package and with a different price. Second thing is feature functionality spanning data gathering, workflows, processes, reporting, integration, so kind of that platform problem. And then 3, ownership of technical components and who does maintenance and feature development. So really a kind of a challenge around the scaling question and design of the organization to match your portfolio goals.
All right, there's multiple
And it's
questions.
a rich question, lots of pieces. So,
So a few things. So I think just there are a couple questions. I want to just take one at a time. So one thing is how do you create an organization structure that around UX, PM, dev at a different L2 level to make this possible? So I think a lot of the team a lot of you probably heard of something called like Amazon two-pizza team. Like, you know, if you want to build something, put a highly empowered team with a small number of them, and then they can just be able to move fast and test and learn and so on. So I think that is definitely super true. And a lot of times we have sort of like the Scrum team structure similar to that. And one of the things are lesser known is there's a process before the two-pizza team. That's called a two-pizza team before the two-pizza team. What it does is actually, not everyone in Amazon operates this way, but one of the GMs who runs the business in their CloudWatch, we actually had a really good conversation around it. It's something that we also do that at, some of the company, PayPal and Shutterfly, which is that we have this semi-permanent teams. And traditionally you have this, annual strategic planning. You have annual strategic planning, define your financial goals, and they translate it into a bunch of business units or product leads and executives say, these are the key initiatives we're going to work on. And then you kind of go get budget for these initiatives. And then you would get the budget to form team and so on and so forth. And the concept of portfolio management is taking that concept, but not so strict, and then translate to less financial and then more of a people. Because today, when we build product, we can't use money to buy resources, right? But resources need to be there when we started to work on things. So the UX, PM, dev, and so on, that's available resource. So we structure this in a responsive portfolio way, is to say, with a high-level goals, and the high-level goals look at the horizon and for, annual or semi-annual. That give us a direction, and that would help us to say what's our quarterly focus and milestone and so on. Quarterly or whatever you feel comfortable. Most companies use quarterly, and from there you will have the goals and have the leads or teams to say what are the key areas of focus. And from there you will have a very like a sort of almost gut feeling to say how much resources we need from areas. And then from there, you can say, I'm going to focus on my two-pizza teams. There are two ways to do the two-pizza team per se. One is to say, I can just put people together and then just have them freely roam around and just create a sort of an initiative team, and then to tackle certain goals until it's done for 1 or 2, 3 quarters. Or you can have this sort of a pseudo team where your core team stays, and then you have other people to take some of the work coming to you. So in that way, meaning that either you do a completely fluid team structure, which most companies don't do, or you do a semi-permanent team that's sort of like your core team still here, and you may have other teams support you, either having this team join you at a temporary basis for a couple of quarters, or they just take a part of the activities on this core team's roadmap to work on in the next quarter or two until you reach the outcome or you decide you're not going to move forward. So that's the org structure, and that's kind of tied into something of the domain ownership. And because the nature of domain or component as well as the outcome could require multiple, and that's kind of like lead to something we could call it combo or whatnot. You could always have a core team. Your core team either build on something as domain based, but they could be pulled into your initiative squad or whatnot. And so the core team could still work from a management perspective. You have a stable management reporting structure, and you also have somewhat of best practices, but the majority of your time you actually spend with your sort of the mission team or your initiative team, so that you have at least a matrix structure to support both roles. And that's actually very similar to product management is cross-functional function. Even though you're reporting to product, you spend most of the time working with the cross-functional teams. And the other function can also work that way. As we are cognizant on people's growth reporting structures and somewhat of the domain proficiency, not completely, but some level of that. At the same time, you create that some sort of a movement in your organization to support the different goals and focuses as time change. So I hope that answered the question. Any follow-up on this?
Yeah, thanks, Becky. Yeah, if you've got any more on that org design, drop it in the Q&A. But I think that's actually a good lead in to two other questions that got asked. I think you're going to cover both of these topics in the next session or dig deeper. So maybe we'll just kind of dip our toe in the water here. But there was a question about differentiating between backlog prioritization and portfolio prioritization, right? Which I think speaks to this, like, as you get more complex with your organization design, right? How do you differentiate between these two things? And then a nice tee up on what tools would you recommend for portfolio management? I know I have one, but yeah, so maybe you can touch on both of those, Becky.
All right, cool. So yeah, so I think one of the things that were about the backlog prioritization, or, I think a lot of us actually learned from, early days of Agile, say, product managers, keep your backlog groomed. And then we realized, dang, that doesn't make sense, because when I grew my backlog, I prioritize based on what I think is the most important things at that time. And as soon as you release certain feature set to the market, everything changed, right? Your prioritization at that moment of time doesn't really matter anymore, because things changed. If my goal right now is to drive, user adoption, so I have all the things about like a tech debt, scaling, and all that stuff. It's not a problem. But then, a couple of quarters down the road, and have lots of user adoption. We have did a lot of tests around. We did a lot of hacks. So we did all this growth, hacking, and whatnot. But it's not scalable. So our platform is failing, and then we need to figure out something. And then we did a 65 different integration to different platform, and then half of them really should be ported out and shared component. And that backlog grooming is very challenging and dangerous if you don't have the context on what am I prioritizing for, right? What are we prioritizing for? If what is important is changing, we can't have backlog grooming. So what that means is that kind of go to the next session a little bit more, and we talk about the sort of why top-down alignment is really important. If we were to say, as a company right now, our key focus is growth, and we cannot forget about retention. We cannot forget about the stability and whatnot, but we are focusing on growth right now. We need to get new customer. Oh, sorry, growth is the wrong word. A new customer, right? New customer acquisition. We're going to spend 50% of our time and the resources and energy and whatnot to acquire new customer. It could come from all places. It could be marketing, it could be product, it could be UX and experimentation, data, all that. 50% of focus. Now, we prioritize in that team, that anyone getting involved in that team said all the things that we could do, you prioritize it towards that goal. And let's say, obviously when you talk about retention and others, obviously towards those goals as well. And, a couple months down the road, you were super successful in driving new customers. Now retention is a big problem because you start losing a lot of them because of various reasons. So now you need to prioritize for every product team that are part of this retention initiative and focus. We say, okay, we have to prioritize our product backlog ideas towards this retention focus. And that's where, sort of the prioritization is tricky, in that if we can't have a static prioritization framework, and then we have to change it based on our focus. So that's around prioritization. Obviously regarding tooling, and I want to just call out a little bit, one of the reasons the main reason I started Dragonboat was because there was just no tool for portfolio management in the modern world. I use traditional portfolio management tools. They cost millions of dollars. They're very expensive to implement. They're really very much focused on financials, and they are also very much focusing on governance. And that's sort of really waterfall era. And then you have product teams coming together. They're like, hey, we need we need to manage our roadmaps. We need to manage our backlogs. We need to communicate to our stakeholders. So you have all those product management roadmap tools for individual product managers. But then what happens is, as the company started to scale, you're like, well, it's portfolio. We have to run it as a portfolio because we have to collectively create an outcome what a company needs at the time we need them. And that's not product management times N. There's a lot more intertwined, a lot of adjustment. That's really portfolio management. So as I was trying all the tools, really couldn't find it and realized that portfolio management is not very well understood in the new way of thinking about it. And that's really what we started, what I started Dragonboat really is taking product management, portfolio management, and then the overall workflow of running a product organization into a tool. So that's basically a short answer to it.
Awesome. Yeah. Her tool is really great, guys. You should check it out. Thanks, Becky. Let's see. I think we've still got time for at least one more question. So Ryan asked about the role who's typically responsible for portfolio management, and then shifting from individual product roadmaps to portfolios, since that could impact the product manager's responsibility. So sort of roles and responsibilities as we scale into this practice.
Right. Excellent question. So a couple of things. One is that you think about the CPOs, right? So ultimately the goal of the product organization are building product that customer love and drive business outcome at the right time. And that's really what the goal of the entire product organization. Obviously, our chief product officers will be the ones responsible to oversee the entire product organization's direction. Now, quite often, chief product officers are just having so much on his or her plate, and there are evolving roles come through. That's really product operations that helps to each product managers to work collectively, collaboratively, and focusing on how do we decide on portfolio goals, where do we allocate things, and how each of the product team will work together. Now, individual product managers, I would say 80-20, right? So everyone runs a portfolio because every individual product managers do have to decide how much I'm going to build our innovation, longer term product versus, support revenue growth, support, existing customer. So that practice and the best practice and the knowledge is still critical to be used by individual product managers, but they're still primarily focusing on their customer, their goals and so on. So it's an 80-20 goal. Now, if you go to chief product officer, that will be almost like, the other way around, to really think about where my product organization should focus, how different goals interplay, and how different teams should work together. And the product operations, if you're lucky to have them, if not, highly recommend it, to have them to work connecting product and executives, as well as the product teams, and also cross-functional teams to support the portfolio cadence, the portfolio focus, the portfolio collaboration, as well as reporting insights and iteration of cadence moving forward.
Great, thank you. I'm just looking through, since we're almost to the end. If we don't have all of our questions answered, we'll try to get some answers out to you, but I was seeing if we could squeeze one more little bit of information in here. Let's focus on what Tamara asked, which was, I think the question is, how many products or teams, or what's sort of that magic number, if there is one, that says, oh, we should probably transition to portfolio management. Do you have a feel for that?
Yeah, it's interesting. What we noticed is like a 4 is the magic number for whatever reason. So it's like when you have a 2, it's a 2 by 2, and then you have a 3, it's a 3 by 3. So then when you start to have 4, that became something a lot more just crisscrossing, a lot of balancing, and that's also a lot of thinking on how we should scale from here on. So 4 somehow is the magic number.
Nice. So let's see, maybe we'll go through the last 2 at the time we have. We understand if people need to drop, but if Becky, if you can stay on for just a second, we might just at least try to get a quick answer for the folks who asked. So the next question from Lee was, first of all, great presentation. How do you effectively communicate to quote unquote green teams that their resources will be allocated to quote unquote yellow teams while fostering a healthy and positive culture?
Right. So it's awesome. I really think that's something where we took some time to go through. Now there's a team owner. There's also outcome owner. So when you have people both own team and outcome, it will drive very different behavior. Today, when there's nobody owns outcome, then it's very difficult to say it's never going to happen, right? If there's no owner, it's not going to happen. So you have outcome owner, initiative owner, then really help people to focus on different things. The outcome and initiative owner does not have to tie to team. So, and that really happened in PayPal, for example. We had a team, they had an initiative that none of the product team worked on it, but because the outcome is so important to their business and product, they become the outcome owner. So then they work with all the other teams. So, and even though their entire resources move to support someone else, and they actually own the outcome and are working with the cross-functional teams.
Cool, nice. And I think that actually is a good connector to our final question from Bernie, which was, could you elaborate a bit more on the difference between outcome roadmaps and product roadmaps? And you may be also getting into this in one of our future sessions.
Right. So outcome roadmap and product roadmap is different in that outcome roadmap measure both. First, starting with where things are, where our goals, where we are, and then use that to drive prioritization. And from there, then you obviously track your both the outcome progress as well as your roadmap progress. Roadmap feature, right? List of features and time and delivery. Now, most of the roadmap today, as we notice, you always have, list of the product features and time and again chart and so on. And so that really tied to is say, hey, outcome roadmap produce a point of time product roadmap. So they are connected. It's just a snapshot of product roadmap because outcome roadmap is what drives a product roadmap decision, and that would evolve throughout the time.
Whew, amazing. You were fast and furious there at the end. I appreciate it, Becky. So many good questions. I'm glad that we had so much engagement from the group. And I think that will take us to the end of our time. So just a reminder that if you want to hear more about the topics we were just digging into on the Q&A, those are getting much deeper coverage in our upcoming sessions, one in August on the 17th and one in September on the 14th. Becky, thank you. This was incredible. So appreciate your wisdom and experience here. And I think Christina mentioned this at the beginning, but we will be sending out an email that will have additional information about future sessions as well as recording for this one, if you would like to send that along to other folks. And Christina also just shared in the chat the link to register for the next two events if you have not done that already. Becky, any closing words from you before we wrap this up?
Well, thank you, everyone. It's a great question and super excited to share more. We have more resources here. In addition to the next two series, we have responsiveppm.org. It's actually community around this topic. So you're welcome to join and get more information. I'm on LinkedIn, obviously. If you are, want to just chat more, reach out. Happy to know more. Something that we're super passionate about. So always love to hear from you, feedback and questions.
Great. Awesome. Thank you so much. And with that, I think we will wrap it up. Everybody have a wonderful rest of your day and week, and hopefully we'll see you back here on August 17th.
Thank you, Rachel. Thanks everyone. Thanks, Christina.